Jesus Through the Qur'an and Shi'ite Narrations, selected by Mahdi Muntazir Qaim, translated by Hajj Muhammad Legenhausen, with assistance of Muntazir Qaim, is an example of how Islam has more to teach about the Messiah mentioned within the egregor Ihsaus, or Jesus as one may know him, which happens to be 4 historical characters, plus a bunch of mythological characters, but you'll find that by name, including his kunya, Muhammad's only mentioned 5 times. But Jesus is mentioned, while Isa is mentioned in 25 verses. So, but if you look at the overall information that is to be had, we have, far more to be said. This book well, it's not a complete text, particularly when you realize that before the Shia were the Ibadi, and after them were the Sunni and the Sufi and some other groups that aren't quite, but they recorded their history as well. And so the Quran being the most important source for the Muslim, you start off with that. And in that is a prophecy. You have a prophecy about his name, which is found in the Gospel of Barnabas. The Ahmed in 61:6. Is it 61:6? Yeah. Just like in the Song of Psalms, you have his name is Muhammad and because Eem instead of Een in the Aramaic, so that translation over. The birth, the childhood, the prophethood, the characteristics, the religion, his successor, disciples, Bel, the children of Israel, their food, their denial, their extremism, their monasticism, his ascension, his second coming on the resurrection, his own words, a portion of the gospel that's much more reliable than anything you'll find in the New Testament. I mean, who's this Paul? Who's passing this on? Even Paul's writings had edits to them, but we trust that when it's narrated to have come through the Imams, that they learned from, it was a direct succession of basically the Upanishad sort of teaching. But we know much more about those lineages and even the Sufi lineages than what is said about, the Bible. And it's clear we leave gaps when we don't know. Now, some of these are, per se, abbreviation. You don't have, here's 5 generations to bring it to an Imam, and this Imam is the 12th, and therefore, or he's the 8th, and he said that the Prophet said this. And there's a lot of it's generally the same sort of thing that you see with the companions being listed. There are some certain practices that are mentioned. I don't remember where it says in this text. I don't know how many texts are being quoted here. But, like, for example, when one fasts, I guess particularly a voluntary fast because people aren't even expecting it, that you put some oil or something on your hair and your lips to kind of obscure the fact that you're fasting. And I don't know if that helps with some people. It helps with hide it from some people. But, one was to do things openly and quietly. The prayer of the Tuesday night, and let me make sure which night it is one ritual that the Shia have. as an extra thing with 30 vowels in it, and you recite Surah Hamd with the verse Al-Kursi one time, and Surah Tawheed, Surah 112, 7 times. And God is supposed to give one the reward of Job, the patient son of John, Zechariah, and Jesus, the son of Mary. There's the mention of the fast of the 25th of the 11th month, in which this is the 11th month, so it's as appropriate as any for me to talk about this. So it's the 1st right now. So the 22nd is going to be a Sunday, and then so I guess a Wednesday. So, that many Wednesdays from now, that it's believed that it's the best day of the 11th month in which the Kaaba, the foundation was laid for it, that I'm sorry, I didn't prepare this like I should have. That Ali ibn Talib, yeah, I can read the Arabic. So the verse there, وَأَوْصَانِي بِالصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ. I read these books in Arabic. Some of the books don't come with the Arabic, so I obviously can't read that. I do read stuff online, too. But what was I saying? It's said to be the day when Jesus appointed his successor. The 25th of the 11th month is. But of course, there's a difference between the appointing of a successor and given a certain degree of authority. But the Simon, the Shimon that is mentioned here, well, other pages, is not the Simon that Paul meant. We find out that in some of the alternative Gospels, after Paul got hit on the head, we find out that he went off to this course with the Simon the magician, and then he started. As a Muslim, I do not believe that Jesus was crucified, and there's also reasons within the Bible. How can you be dead for 2 days and risen and spend 3 days in the grave? But it is thought that somebody, we do believe that I could say that yes, because as a Muslim, we believe that the Messiah was not crucified or killed, as the verse states. And I did a series commenting on those 25 Qur'an verses that should be at the start of the list that I'm going to put this at. Well, I'm going to put it on the Shia list too. But yes, by God, all things are possible. And just like many other prophets, Jesus isn't said to have done as many miracles as Muhammad did, and it's not narrated as soundly through the Christian tradition. We have more words of Jesus narrated that are transmitted as a secondary or tritatory source here than you have in the Bible. The red letter editions of the Bible don't have Jesus saying as much. You have beatitude sorts of things. You have him teaching to be no vain repetitions, but vain repetitions. Anyways, no, I'm drifting from the question, and the question was, somebody like him was killed. And if you look into the historical characters, you find, compare this to the book of Revelations, by the way, that Yuda Barabbas ben Yuda, which is one of the 4 characters that was written into the Jesus egregor, he prophesied about being killed with his 2 companions. the book of Revelations was written about 50 years earlier, and they have Aramaic copies of it before it became a Christian text, rewritten into the worst Greek of the entire Bible, that he was killed trying to storm the temple because he was some sort, he was a zealot, and he thought, all this zealot stuff of messing with the Romans and stuff like this. Jesus, like every other prophet, wasn't about conquer and I will be in charge of you. It was, the primary thing was to guide the people. And, the poor guy with the poor mother works with his hands. That's the historical Jesus that we believe in. But Eutybarabas Menudus was killed. Also, Apollonius Christ is said to have been crucified, and he was a contemporary of Paul. And you'll find out that some of his words also made it into the Jesus egregor. But it's believed the oldest versions of the Greek New Testament, the canonical Gospels, seem to have 19 chapters. And the Jews didn't really speak of Jesus being crucified until the Christians went about saying the stuff they did. And you find the Romans made fun of it too, depicting him as, oh, you people are celibate because of this, because this donkey-headed guy crucified. That's some of the earliest proof that Christianity existed. But there are people among the people who say that they're Christian that aren't Christian, and I've seen documentaries, I've met people, they just don't know better than to call themselves Christian. They don't worship Jesus. They're purely monotheistic. They look to the good of what remains in the Bible and follow that instead of this. In the Talmud, it says various things. If he actually went around and said the thing, yeah, the Jews likely would have killed him. A lot of the Jews, most of the 83 prophets mentioned by name in the Israelite narrations, by Israelite narrations, I mean the actual Aramaic before the Qur'an was revealed. They mentioned 83 prophets, and they killed most of the prophets. The Israelites did. I'm not saying this is a Jewish thing that, oh, it's a prophet, we have to kill it. Because they believed, as the priest written into the book of Deuteronomy, that if you kill a prophet, then it's not really a prophet. So they'd try to kill a prophet out in the desert or something like this. Oh, he's leaving to go to the bathroom. Let's kill him and or gather food in the outskirts of the city. So they try to kill him. And but yeah, the Talmud basically responds to the Christian thing. So God-fearing, a love that is real, more than this, and a God being just. And you find out that Muhammad went to a place that Jesus did, and there was a voice, a fire whose fuel is men and stones, and the rocks were upset. The rocks are innocent, by the way, but the rocks were upset for years, until Muhammad came and said, yeah, I got a verse like this too. And he explained that verse. And, Jesus was one of the three individuals that was, he's one of the three, I took a long time reading here and there from this, but he's one of the three individuals that talked as a baby. One was to correct his mother, because his mother looked and said, hey, praying to God that his child would be like this rich guy with status, or whatever it was exactly. And the baby was granted the gift of, the baby spoke up and said, no, let me be like, and he went over to the poor. Every prophet is the living word. There is the living word in the book and stone, and this is something we would say agrees with the Bible, is that a Nabi is someone who brings out the inner fruit. So they're just not a messenger prophet who comes with the scripture, but they all are ones who come with a specific scripture, but they live the example of their entire nation to live the teachings in more than a exact, hey, this happened, this is what it says, so we can only do this. No, it's about doing a lifestyle. But also in terms of God says to a thing, be, and it is. Just like the universe, in a way, is the word of God. Yeah, the only one called is Jesus, because as the verse says, that Mary was, Mary was a single woman. She didn't, probably very young, didn't know about didn't know, about finding a husband to take care of her when her aging guardians were no longer able to take care of her. And, she was told she was going to have a child, and she's like, oh, I wasn't, no man's done that with me. I'm not, no, I'm not unchaste. No man's even touched me, you know. So, but she was given the word, and the word was the announcement of the Son. And therefore, Jesus is that word because, it's unique because no other prophet is mentioned in terms of, hey, the annunciation of the birth was even before the pregnancy. So then she went and conceived. It doesn't say that she didn't conceive naturally. The ascent is something you'll find through narrations. And you'll find the Shia say, well, if the Quran doesn't literally make it necessary for Jesus to return, then we can also say that the 12th Imam, for him to not have died and to ascend and then return, that's not necessary too. We can infer that. The prophet doesn't say it, but we can infer that. That's the logic, and I don't think that logic is necessary. But yeah, the point was just, enter heaven by the mercy of God. I believe the merit of the idea of the Imams, not per se. In Sunni narrations, we have the mention of the Imams, but we don't have the names. Muslim narrates that there will be 12 Imams, and Bukhari narrates that there will be 7. It doesn't say only that many. But we can say, per se, that it's no longer the age where you can only learn from what the Prophet said and only learn from what the Quran has to say, and bringing it out in such a pure way. I can't say there's been anyone in hundreds of years that we can say that to. The example of the Shia, not the Shia, the Sufi leaders was on that thing. Yeah, he healed the blind and the lepers and the lame. The Battle of the Camel. Now, one thing you'll find here is Jesus is the likeness. One narration is Jesus is the likeness to Ali, and some of those with Ali. Some of the those on his side will be the Sunnis have this sort of idea too. Those on his side will be believers. Those who exaggerate their status will be the rejectors, and those who fight them or oppose them will be the disbelievers. Now, some of the people in the Battle of the Camel later bounced back from that, but some of them did not. And I am not going to justify, just like Jesus didn't say, just list yourself as one of my followers and that's it. He wanted people to be willing to fight when necessary, to make the struggle, to give charity, to make that striving. So I'm not going to justify somebody because of their family. I'm not going to justify someone because that they knew someone, whether that's even to the extent of that being a prophet. And that's the mistake that a lot of the people that are part of particular sects look at. But I look at the narrations to their strength. If a guy forgot the word 10 when he talks about somebody earlier in life, are we going to take what he said as an old man over what he said as a young man? and forgot some of the details and words when he got older? And all those narrations coming from that? Or are we going to look at the other? Are we going to look at the soundness of every individual in the chain? The Quran and even the narrations tell us to think about the various things in the universe. And, we know more about to trust to look at the book of ourselves and the book of of nature in an abbreviated way of expressing that. They did not kill him or crucify him, but it appeared to them so. Likewise, the cultation of Al-Qaim. Yeah, that's what's the same sort of thing. And Jesus is compared to the different prophets, and praying, Jesus was said to have been saved. They wanted to stone him once, and he said a particular supplication. He called upon God by 8 names. And there's also said to be a secret name of God, which Jesus knew a certain number of letters. Muhammad knew a certain number of letters. Noah knew a certain number of letters. And by the way, they knew where these letters were. Just like in Surah 19, I can tell you that the first 33 verses end in Iya, and then after some verses it again returns to Iya, but I don't remember the rest of those verses at the moment, of any of them actually at the moment. Jesus and his companions performing miracles together. The greatest prophet. Now, at the end of Surah 2, no Quran-centered Muslim is going to say that there is a greatest prophet, because you're going to see at the Quran position is that Surah 20, at the end of Surah 2, we're not supposed to invent distinctions between the prophets, and we're not supposed to discriminate between them. Muhammad, when compared with Jesus and Moses and Job and some of the others, he refused to say that he was better. A lot of people nowadays are going to turn against that, but this is what Muhammad said. This is what the Quran says. Our nation is going to be judged last, and we're going to testify about the legacy of what came before. 11 imams after the prophet were killed, and then one ascend. There are people that result in extremisms. There are non-Muslims who are Shia that actually worship Ali and the imams and even some of the saints and Fatima anyways. So there are those who go to the extremism that this isn't part of Islam, but in general the Shia are part of Islam, so they don't worship Ali. But some of those do, even them, say stuff like, "Oh well, now this is a very rare one. It's not the usual, but people say that Ali should have got the revelation, but Muhammad got it instead. But they were the same family, so there was a mistake." And but Islam teaches that the light beings are perfect. So they don't have a choice to make a mistake, and they're told exactly what to do and how to do it. It's messed up, period. What they were told not to divide on political things, to choose your leaders among yourselves. There's no good reason not to have a global caliphate. All the different cultures and languages and stuff, it's not needed to be different leaders. There's so much of a degree of autonomy, but people want their own authority to be listed as supreme. And here, much of what was said to have been the gospel, which, by the way, was originally the Injil we talk about, just like the Torah, is the original revelation to these messengers, not what's attributed to them later, not the books of the Tanakh, not the 5 books of Moses. Those aren't necessarily those contain of the revelations, but how much of it we don't know. But he preferred nothing in creation like the religion that's been bestowed on them. And just like it says in the Bible, he came without, I didn't come with my own doctrine. I came to restore the law. And every prophet came to restore the law. Once enough of the law was lost, God sent another prophet. But now we have enough that we can step aside the mistakes of conservatism, step aside the mistake what the liberals ignore, and that we can return to the sources. And I don't know what to say. As I said, I was unorganized this. The soul isn't harmed, but it's the body that's that's harmed. Some come seeming very pious, but they're not. They obviously wanted to kill him for his claims of miracles. Yeah, because look at what's happened with the emergence of Protestantism. We had this shift towards capitalism. So people focused on making money instead of let's do some good for ourselves, for society, for our families, for the church. A lot more killing happened once it became the thing. We're not in it for the church. Now, I'm not saying we should go back to a church state. Obviously not, because as a Muslim, they were persecuted. But just like everything right about America can be said to be Islamic by defining that. Well, government in the Islamic view, for example, is not very much, it's not something where most things are enforced by the government. Sharia law is mostly ethics that right in Sharia law is the government has no right to enforce them. Any idea of taxation is minimalized. My country, by the time the last POTUS left office, we had 84% of the taxes going indirectly or directly towards welfare for the rich, 1% going towards the poor. And because of all this insurance and high taxation, we have, and by the way, 8% of what's left goes straight up to war. And we haven't had a necessary war since World War II in this country. And we've killed, anyways, I don't want to per se go too much into that, but the idea is a minimalist government. The religious communities, as opposed to how things are run in America, have a degree of autonomy. Yeah, when there is a war, a portion of it, a fifth portion goes to the state. And the alms goes entirely, the required alms goes towards the poor. Whether it's a third of your sacrifice, which comes up in a month, in 9 days, is a third must go to the poor. Your zakat, al-fitr, that 4 heaping handfuls of grain or fruit are at the very least half the piece of fruit you got in your hand or something. That goes to poor people, to feed the poor. Your zakat al-mal, whether it's your portion of mining or our food store or money that you've kept behind for a year, all of that goes to the poor. It's not the government taking care of that. There's nobody in the Islamic vision making money by charging a percentage of profit. There's not the interest. So, and there's the encouragement of freeing slaves and all this other stuff. In the modern society, that's called bail money. But be careful who you free from bail, obviously. Be careful who you give bail money to, particularly if you're using a bondsman. He obviously prophesied about the resurrection day. The Comforter, as I've explained before, the Bible prophesies about a Comforter. And it can't possibly be the Holy Ghost that comes with the revelation to every single prophet. It's every prophet before Muhammad, at least every major one, was to a set of prophesied about the end times and prophesied about a seal of the prophets that would come next. And Jesus was, we believe that there were Yahya, or John, as you know him, came before and prepared the way for him. Just as the situation with Zechariah, with Mary's mother, they wanted a boy, but Mary needed to be a step in between. There's the story in here about Jesus was walking with some people. They came upon 3 bricks of gold and said, "These kill people." And so the few people, they took the bricks of gold and they figured out a way to kill one of them. But the one that they killed had already poisoned them. So he died from being killed by them, and they died because they didn't know he was poisoned by him. And there's another story of 3 where Jesus was with a guy, and there were 3 loaves of bread that they had. And they each ate, but when Jesus went off, you had the one loaf went missing, and the guy said he didn't know. And finally the guy admitted, and he was forgiven, and the loaf of bread was put next. But the forgiveness is given away through the prophets. It's not something that's automatic, but there's a lot of things here. Blessed are he who abandons the present desire, Barakatuh,